what could stop the war, just immediate, very quick actions, like just double support of Ukraine, so that lack of human resource on the battlefield would be replaced by equipment, by special arms, just very sophisticated and up to date. And quantity and quality should be very high, so that to create advantage on the battlefield, military advantage on the battlefield. In this case, Mr. Putin should make a mobilization, or to significantly increase expenditure. As I said, that already will be not possible. And that will be a real pressure. That could create I wouldn't say immediate, but within few months could create an effect, not years as all other sanctions were.
Vladimir Putin has been either president or prime minister since December 31st, 1999, and has seen his country through a quarter of a century of seismic events: the Chechen War, the Sochi Winter Olympics, the annexation of Crimea, the 2018 Football World Cup, and, most recently, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. His first prime minister, Mikhail Kasyanov, was in post from 2000 to 2004, and he joins us now to discuss the last 25 years. Hello.
Hello.
So if we can start with the mood when Putin actually first took office, was there optimism in Russia? Was he welcomed by the international community at that time?
Yes, absolutely. At that time, many of us just wanted the more energetic way just to build a democratic state with the market economy, and Mr. Putin demonstrated his desire to continue the reform program what Mr. Yeltsin started in the 90s, and that's what the reason why 52% of Russians voted for him, and he started with the energy moving Russia on that direction. And we had very good relations with the European Union. We had good relations with Great Britain, and good relations with the US and Canada, Japan, etc. Yes, it was good time in the first 4 years of working together with President Putin. It was a completely different person at that time.
And can you just tell us a bit about, as a person, what he was like in those early years to work with?
Yeah, as I said, he demonstrated his desire to implement reforms, and when we discussed and I agreed to work with him as a prime minister, he promised me to support all the initiatives, all the reforms my cabinet initiated at that time, and very quickly we turned out Russia from the financial crisis to the sustainable growth, and the trajectory of sustainable growth that's lasted for 8 years, and the GDP was doubled within this period of time, and he supported all the reforms I initiated, with the exclusion only 2 of them. One of them, the administrative reform, which I believed that the administrative reform should be targeted to reduce government's responsibility and government's regulations, government's control on everything, and normal life of people and economy. And Putin thought differently on that. He saw just not to reduce the control, not to reduce the authority, but just to reshuffle the cabinet and making just many agencies, ministries, etc. That's after my departure, the quantity of bureaucrats just was doubled. And the second reform, he didn't support me as promised, but didn't implement this promise, support a reform of the gas sector. That was the reform was absolutely prepared, which of course suggested to split Gazprom for two pieces. One of them, of course, the largest producer of natural gas, and the second part, that is transportation, which should be under control of the government, not necessarily government owned, but under control of the government, so that to create market, to create equal access for all producers and for all consumers to this infrastructure. But Putin didn't allow me to do this, and on the later stage we understood why he did it, why he didn't allow me to pursue this reform, because just he used Gazprom as monopoly, as a I would say as an arm with the fight with the neighboring countries. That was the period on that. But in general, as I said, we had good relations, and we believed that Russia going in the absolutely right direction. And with the European Union, we already in that time had just the joint meeting of the cabinet, of my cabinet, and together with the full set of the European Commission. And we announced in 2003 that we are strategic partners and we're building up trade-free zone, visa-free zone from Lisbon to Vladivostok, and that with absolutely great prospects.
Yeah, a remarkably different time. Did you feel in those two cases that you just offered of him resisting plans that you wanted to put in place, were there warning signs for you at that moment of what it might become like to live in Russia and what politics in Russia might become like in the coming years?
Yeah, at that time I thought that was mistakes of Mr. Putin, and moreover, not only not allowing me implement these important reforms, but also just pressure on the business started in the last year of our joint work in the 2003. There was pressure on Yukos, and then just after my departure, just the redistribution of private property started. And Putin's friends, who was nobody, the people even didn't know of their existence, appeared to be billionaires just within a short period of time. And it was absolutely the beginning of change of the overall policy internally and externally. And but at that time, even after my departure from the cabinet, I thought that Putin was mistakes which we could improve on the future. And that's when in 2008, 2007, 2008 elections, I just decided to go just run for presidential posts. And that time just it was good chances for me because Putin that didn't run was Medvedev, whom was not so known in the country. Just and it was big chances for me, but they cutted me on the political grounds just 1 month after just started of the campaign. And then there was absolutely shift. And since that time, we already understand that Putin already announced in his speech in Munich in 2007, he already announced that Russia, Putin's Russia, surrounded by enemies or something like that. That's already new policy started to be implemented. And a year after that, 2008, first invasion to Georgia. And that was absolutely different life started. But that's
And
also a problem of the West, of reaction of that.
And if we go back to 2004 quickly, just before those elections, you were dismissed in that year. Did you worry at the time that you were dismissed about the direction that Putin would take?
Not really, not really. I didn't worry. Just as I said, I thought that there was mistakes, which sooner or later Putin realized and would improve, and that was I wanted to go to the business. But when in 2004, after the national tragedy in Beslan, when there was massive killings of terror attack, Putin, instead of consolidated society and to improve the civil security, instead he announced that we are surrounded by enemies. And he started changing everything. He put all political parties for re-registration, and as a result, after the war, we had 40 political parties, and the result appeared to be only 6 controlled by Putin. Just I would say the narrow bottleneck just for people to step in politics officially, so legally to step in politics. Here, put it under control, and human rights activists announced be just as a foreign spies, something like this, some kind of special staged movies appeared, or not movies but short videos appeared in the central television showing that changing or passing information to British officers or something like that, American officers. That was a different mood. That already was end of 2004. Autumn 2004. That was just the first sign of the changing of overall attitude internally and externally.
That's interesting because it's earlier than some would say the turning point is a lot of people cite the Munich Security Conference in 2007 as the big turning point when his attitudes, particularly to the West, darkened. Do you agree that that was a significant moment in Putin's foreign policy, particularly, or should we be looking earlier when we think about his change of mind?
Yet, and talking about just external policy change, 2007 speech in Munich, that would be the turning point. That when openly Putin already started to do this. But overall changes internally, first of all, just as I said, redistribution of power, of property, and control of the political squeeze, the I would say the environment that he had started in the autumn 2004.
And in 2008, the year that we've obviously been speaking about, he handed over to Medvedev, who was seen at the time as being a bit more moderate. But actually, just a few weeks ago, he called the editors of the Times, where, of course, I work, legitimately military targets. How do you think their relationship in particular has evolved, those two pairs? Is Medvedev still as relevant as he once was?
Yeah, Mr. Putin believed that Medvedev would be, as I would say, very close assistant, will follow all recommendations and from Putin, and it's appeared to be the case. And then in a later stage, Medvedev just started to believe that he could play his role as on equal footing with Putin, which Putin just didn't want to get in any case, and that was a real, I would say, I wouldn't say tension, but it was a tense period just for Putin the last month before elections of 2012. Yeah, that was the case. But in general, of course, Putin continued all this Medvedev's term, presidential term. Putin was the leader of the country, and everyone who knew Putin understood that the overall policy made by him.
Can we talk about Ukraine? I mean, when the annexation of Crimea occurred in 2014, did you think that a full-scale invasion such as the one we saw in 2022 was inevitable at that point, or were you surprised when it happened?
Yeah, that's important to understand that for Mr. Putin, important just to raise to get international respect, and special respect of the United States. He dreams that leader of Russia should be on an equal footing with the U.S. president, and just to continue to discuss just the fate of every country in the world, and just making decision on that. And when after Bucharest's NATO meeting in May 2008, when three countries knocked at the door of NATO and asked them to invite and to accept to NATO. And after that, when it didn't happen, just you remember invasion on Georgia, into Georgia of Georgia, and the reason of further Putin's was aggressive behavior just started there, because just reaction of the West was zero. There was so-called ceasefire plan, Sarkozy plan, we call it that time, because Sarkozy was the chair of European Union, and he negotiated with Medvedev, Putin on that. And 3 months after this, nothing on this plan was implemented by Russia. But moreover, they announced independence of South Ossetia and Abkhazia. One third of territory of Georgia occupied by Putin's Russia. And the reaction of the West 3 months after, business as usual.
Yeah.
Just the West forgotten about that and left Georgia as it was under Putin's pressure. And Putin understood that is allowed. That is the way. That is the ticket. That is the how just the West allow him to implement international law. That was brought him to a next stage in 2014 for annexation of Crimea. And remember what kind of sanctions was exposed on that time. Just minimum. Putin was smiling, and afterwards, just for many years, he was smiling and decided that that is a reaction. That is nothing special, or just it's like an imitation of sanctions. And that's what brought him to the decision to have a full-scale invasion.
And when you were working as his prime minister during those earlier years, did you ever have conversations with him where you felt personally like you could understand his worldview, particularly with regard to his view to the United States? Like you just said, I think very interestingly there, that he wanted to be seen as a leader on par with the president of the United States. In your personal conversations with him, was that something that would often come up?
In general, of course, he was satisfied with the initial development of the relations, but on a later stage, Putin was very much disappointed, because just in 2003, when it was a special operation on Iraq, and Russia didn't support this, but Putin closed eyes on that, and he believed that he made some kind of silent contract with President Bush. But on the later stage, when we already in opposition in 2006 and 7 started to have demonstrations against Putin's turning just overall policy and human rights violations, just President Bush and Vice President Cheney started to criticize publicly Putin. Putin understood that is, I thought that is the way, that's already contract is there, just we already have a transaction, just you shouldn't criticize. And he understood that his special role, or just closing eyes on his bad deeds, that doesn't work. This, and that's what the overall changes started at that time. And then 2007, as we already mentioned with you, just speech in Munich, he already started publicly criticizing and demonstrating his disappointment of relations with the West.
And having worked with him, how do you think he would respond to the peace talks that we hear Donald Trump, as president-elect, will want to perhaps instigate in the early part of next year? Do you have a sense of how Putin will approach those? What was your prediction for how he might approach the possible end of the conflict?
As I understand, President Trump is going to have a transaction. Putin also would like to have a transaction, but Putin believes that Trump would accept Putin's terms. It means de facto capitulation of Ukraine. And I don't think that Donald Trump would accept situation that the KGB agent, Mr. Putin, just destroying the overall world order established after the Second World War, and establishment of the United States, and the President of the United States would accept such a development, such a changes. Just what is United States making 25% of the world's GDP, European Union making another 25% of GDP, that's 50% of GDP, just made this civilized world, including Great Britain and Japan. But Putin's Russia produces 2% of GDP. And this guy, KGB agent officer, just destroyed the whole world, and just the civilized world should accept this. I don't believe that Donald Trump would go on this scenario, adopting Putin's requirements. Therefore, I think there will be zero result of those negotiations. Simply, there will not be a real negotiations, because negotiations mean some kind of compromise.
That's very interesting. So you think it will be a lot more complicated than some perhaps around the president. I think it will be.
That's what I think. Just the President Trump would reconsider his attitude to the war, and of course he cannot demonstrate weakness of the United States. They're just the leading country and the biggest economy in the world, and that's why just I think with the overall establishment. But we all know that both bipartisan support and the Congress exists for Ukraine. Just the discussion is over the ways, over models, etc., etc. But overall approach absolutely positive, and that's why I think that on the later stage, maybe by April, May, Donald Trump will make an opposite decision, just supporting Ukraine on a larger scale. That will bring another problem for Mr. Putin. And already we hear just speeches or statements from those people who are nominated for very important positions in the future administration. They're already saying we will encourage the oil industry in the United States to produce more oil. It means just the United States oil will appear to be, or just there will not be import or reduced U.S. import of crude oil. It means control prices on a lower level. If the cost of production of oil in the United States is $40 per barrel, it means $50 per barrel price. That will be quite profitable for that. But $50 per barrel international price for Russian Urals, other sort of oil, would be lower because of the quality. It's people know just the discount. That will be $40 for Russian oil. That's why just the cap, which was established by G7 as a $60 per barrel, could be established as a $40 per barrel. Mr. Putin's budget built up on with the expectation having Russian oil with the cost $70 per barrel. It means just there will be a huge deficit growing. But if Putin would be forced to raise his military expenditure from today's 6.5% of GDP up to 12 or 15% of GDP, that's already a way of catastrophe. And that would press Putin just to sit down and to have real negotiations on peace talks.
That's interesting. And I mean, also, you were finance minister before becoming prime minister in Russia. On the actual Russian economy in general, how much of an impact do you think the sanctions that the West has imposed on Russia are actually having? I mean, I know we've got an interest rate in Russia of something more than 20% at the moment. Clearly, it's not an economy that's in a particularly healthy position. But do you think that more widely those sanctions are actually having a big impact, or do you think the West could be going further and doing more to hit Russia's economy?
Of course, all those sanctions just they're working, and they're producing just pressure. But this pressure for the long term. It means just for long term, just creating problems, but not that these sanctions cannot stop the war. What could stop the war? Just immediate, very quick actions like just double support of Ukraine, so that lack of human resource on the battlefield would be replaced by equipment, by special arms, just very sophisticated and up to date, and quantity and quality should be very high, so that to create advantage on the battlefield. Military advantage on the battlefield. In this case, Mr. Putin should make a mobilization or to significantly increase expenditure. As I said, that already will be not possible, and that will be a real pressure. That could create I wouldn't say immediate, but within few months could create an effect. Not years as all other sanctions work, but could really press, and it will be just end of the world, could be even in the upcoming the year 2025.
And can I just ask you finally, before we let you go, what do you think 2025 actually holds for Russia, particularly with regard to what Putin wants? Do you see him wanting to hold on to power essentially indefinitely for as long as he possibly can? Where do you think the next year will take Russia and, of course, all of those countries that are implicated by Putin's actions?
I don't see any positive developments for Russia, for Russian people at all. For international, I would say, development on a vision whether Russia continue to create threats to others. That's exactly the case, and everything will depend, as I said, on the decisions of the Western leaders. It's a very simple way. They should first realize that the war against independent Ukraine, that's issue of security for every European country and for the United States as well. It means just G7 or the wider group should announce we'd like to stop the war on a fair condition this year. Ukraine should get a fair peace agreement. And secondly, as a result of this, to say we will double support of Ukraine, military and financial. And thirdly, we would control the energy market on a lower level. It will be stable, but on a lower level. So that with this understanding, just all things would move to the end. But other decisions, which I think just on the upcoming few months of the upcoming year, that will be some kind thought people would compete with different intellectual plans, models, etc., etc. As I say, Putin is not going to give up anything at this moment. He feels he's stable, and if support continue to be on the same level as this year, 2024, he will continue his war on attrition. He believes he will win this war because human resources in Ukraine just already exhausted, and Putin produces 5 times more of military equipment and ammunition, and he continue just using just advantage on the battlefield, continue occupation of Ukraine, and he believes just sooner or later he will win. That was the scenario which could maybe the most probable scenario, which would be seen by people in the first few months of next year. As I said, on a later stage in May, April, May, June, leaders should realize, Western leaders should realize, that we shouldn't leave Ukraine as it is. Greater support should be provided.
Mikhail Kasyanov, thank you very much for joining us for a fascinating discussion, even though perhaps not an optimistic one. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy New Year.